Hey, what's up, everybody? It's 9:40 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, August the 1st, in the alleged year 2022. It is an overcast, sort of gray day here in west central Michigan. And currently, if you see me kind of sitting weird, currently icing the hamstring on my left leg. And for those out there that like to keep kosher will say I'm icing the long muscle in the back of my left leg. I have a few updates, comment updates, and then a thing. First off, the comment is this. I wanted to personally thank everybody who did leave at least a quote-unquote viewed comment on the last OP Briefs Dyna Blow Your Horn video. Because, first off, yeah, it did give me a sense of, I suppose, the percentage of the people who watch the video and can trouble themselves to put down at least viewed. I appreciate that. But there's more to it than that. That I'm not going to say I didn't appreciate it before, but I never really asked people about it before, because up until I decided to put the channel on monetization, which was January of this year, what I did not realize was that there's more pluses to doing that than, oh, I'll get more views. Because really, with YouTube, I mean, the amount of views that I get, if I were to tell you it was only a very few shekels, that might be an overstatement. It's very little. When you think, I guess the average is like, if you got 1 million views on a video, I think 1 million is worth what? What is it? $1,200 or something? That's not a lot. I was kind of surprised when I found that out too. Anyways, you added up all of my videos and all of the views for all of my videos between this channel, Jonathan Mactimus, my main YouTube channel, and a backup channel, which is the Obery Project. If you added up all the views of all the videos that I posted on those two channels, I'm sure it wouldn't be 1 million. I'm positive. So anybody, just do the quick math there. So look, anybody complaining about the commercials and all the commercials they get on a video, come on. Look, the amount of things that I have to keep software-wise on my computer, materials that I have to acquire and use to do the research and other work that I have to do, the very few donations that I get just cover that. They're not covering the extra time that I have to put in, which is tons of extra time that I have to put in just to do this. Just to form the opinions that I have on things requires tons and tons and tons and tons of time. Studying the Bible, reading other books, thinking, and then creating tools that can be used, materials that can be used, so on and so forth and so on and so forth. It's a big deal. So, to get a few shekels here and there from YouTube, really, you're going to hate because of that? Now, to be honest, yeah, I don't think, I can't find a lot of great content on YouTube, but I can't find a lot of great content on BitChute or Odyssey or DLive or any of the other platforms. What's that other one? I haven't been there in a long time. World Truth. Yeah. It's mostly just recycled, broken record, revisionist, like white patriot nationalist stuff. And none of these people seem to be willing to move forward in their beliefs. Like they hit a certain marker and they really should be moving forward from that marker. That's the thing. We all go through permeations of understanding things when we're journeying towards something better. And, if you're presented with new and better information, you really need to seriously examine that for its validity. And unfortunately, I don't think a lot of people do. I think a lot of the people that are actually producing, and they don't produce, they just recycle. They're just posting material of other people's. I don't actually think that a lot of them are, just regular organic folks that believe in a certain thing and so on and so forth. I actually think they are controlled opposition because they want to keep everybody's mindset locked into just that sort of revisionism mindset that stops there and thinks certain things that I believe are controlled narratives, and they don't move forward. They don't say, okay, here's what I've learned about this, but there's new information that's very compelling, and I need to examine that and see if I can work that into my worldview. What I maintain is that my current worldview is probably the only one available that allows you to harmonize what I have to say about, for instance, Mr. A.H., the public face leader of Germany at the time of World War II, the Ashkenazim, various tribes of people called whites, and then various other people kinds. History, how much history has passed since when, what we can trust or likely trust in texts, both religious and secular, and what we can't. I think I'm the closest thing, as far as my worldview goes, out there to reconciling these things. And if you refuse to look at that, I think you're going to be handicapped. So, one of the things that people leaving all the comments, I got 43 comments on the main channel. I've got 9 on the backup, the Obry Project. I even got a few on BitChute. And BitChute's that's a tough crowd. You don't usually get a lot of comments on BitChute, not with a channel that only has a few hundred subscribers like mine. One thing that it did is the 43 of you that took the time to comment, it helped with the algorithm so that, first off, in the 2 weeks since I made that last video, I've gotten 20 more subscribers on that channel. I got 10 more subscribers on the backup channel. So those are increasing algorithms, so those likes and those comments. And before I never did, because I thought, well, that just has to do with monetization and views and so on and so forth. Well, it does have to do with views. And if you think that what I'm doing is important and of value, please continue to comment in some way, shape, or form. Please do that, because that does help to increase who this gets in front of. It's just an algorithmic thing, and it's helpful. The likes are helpful, comments are helpful. I've had times when videos have gotten far more likes, and I didn't really notice the amount of increased subscribers as far as quantity that I noticed when that many people commented. It really just boosted the subs up a lot. I mean, a lot. And same with the backup channel. Quite a lot. The number of views were then greater on this video on both channels. So please continue that in any way, shape, or form that you'd like to or are able. I appreciate it a ton, and it's getting those videos in front of more people, and that's really important. If for nothing else, a very, very different point of view to everything else out there going. Now, a few updates. One, I recently finished the first draft of the Strong's, the Obry Strong's KJV Interlinear on PDF. I don't know if I'm even going to think about publishing that on paper because it's huge. It's like 30-some, it's over 3,000 pages. It was always meant to be a great tool for searches that you cannot do with the existing Bible softwares available. And that's a huge boon. It's a very big help. It's already helped me tremendously. I've started like one word study since I've finished the first draft of that interlinear. And what I'm doing is I'm calling it the OSK. So Obry Strong's KJV, OSK Interlinear. What it's going to allow for is, for instance, one of the issues that we have with understanding how these words have been parsed up, how they have sometimes been incorrectly put together, different forms or variations of these Obri or quote-unquote Hebrew words have been put together. We sometimes have trouble understanding how this sleight of hand is done, because if you go to any of the tools currently available, whether it's Blue Letter Bible, whether it's Bible Hub, Q Bible, eSword, and I'm told, like, even the people that really spring and go with that fancy software like I think it's like Logos and all of that stuff, they're not giving you the kind of tools that you really want to look at. For one thing, variations of a word. How many different ways does it vary, and in what contexts? This allows you to do that. It allows you to look at a specific variation of a word. Take the word ob, Strong's H1, which is defined as a masculine noun and as father by really all concordances and lexicons. H1 as father. And it is presented as the simple root ob, A-B, ob. Well, it has, for instance, ob. This I found out because I had this interlinear and could very quickly and easily do this. I found that ob has 78 variations. Now, why is that right there instantly important? Because for one thing, a noun, even with the prefixes and suffixes that are going to go on it, in the sense that you'll have prefixes that are B, K, L, and M, and they all have their own certain sort of meanings to them. You'll also have suffixes that the establishment tells us means me. Oh, you'll also have, prefixes like A or I, but not usually with ob. Anyways, suffixes like you, which would mean him, y, which would mean my, and then you can get into ones that are more complex, like ikam, meaning like yourselves. But what you do is you have, as you start looking at these and comparing them in context, you'll see, for one thing, that the establishments dictates as far as what these suffixes mean, how and when they don't add up. And you can start seeing how they don't add up when you can gather all of these different variations very easily from this interlinear where you couldn't with the tools available before. That's one thing. You could also do searches on English words, like if they say, take a word like cattle. There's various words that they translate as cattle, or sheep, or lamb, or something. Various words they translate as that. You can punch this in, whether you were using the .odt, which is a file, a raw file generated by LibreOffice, or whether you're using the PDF. And you can open it up just in your browser. And that would be the whole point. Once I publish it on the website, you can open it up in your browser, and you can hit Control F, and then you can do these different searches. The neat thing about searches on both the .odt in LibreOffice or the PDF in either Acrobat or on your browser is that when you open up that search, you can do things like putting spaces in between words, and that's one of the most important things about having this document. You can you can specify what you want to find down to the absolute letter or glyph, depending on if you're looking for English or if you're looking for Obri. Very important. It's not ready to publish just yet. There's a lot of fixes that need to be done on it, little things, which I'm doing as I go. But I do plan on publishing that within at least the month of August, as well as the 3 updated concordances. That's the Obri concordance. That's like 8,674 words of Obri, popularly known as Hebrew. The Arami concordance. That's popularly known as Chaldean or Aramaic. And the Koine, or the Greek concordance. All of these are very, very helpful because every one of them gives you a key as far as here's the letters that are used. In the case of Obri and Arami, they are glyphs. Most people understand why I use those glyphs. I don't write them from right to left like the establishment does. I write them from left to right like most of our Western languages are, because it's a Western language. So you can very easily search these things in a format that you're more familiar with, being a person from the West, most of you. And I don't find it's really all that hard to reorient something like that. I find modern Hebrew, being right to left, is very difficult, just looking at everything backwards like that. It's actually quite easy now putting it in a left to right format. All of the things that I produce that are Obri are left to right format, all of them. These actually help very much. You search for basic roots. And then there's always the exhaustive Obri biglyphs roots chart, which every time I update that with more information, I publish a new version of that. So there's a version of that currently at the website right now. Those things will be on the website as of this month, because today's August 1st. Now, the next thing is, very soon I will be producing an audio of a paper I recently wrote, and right now the person who has volunteered to edit for me, at least this paper, is working on the final edit, because I just did a full audio of the whole thing, which I will probably have to just do one more time, because I had to stop this audio about 100 times to do final edits. That happens about every single time. You'll notice that in my older audios, of course, and that's why sometimes they don't really seem to have the dynamics, because I'm stopping so often to amend these things. And what I really should have done in the past is, once I'm done, once I know that they're good, they make sense, and they're good in audio format, really just go through and redo that audio all over again. It's a ton of work, which is why I didn't do it in the past, but it's certainly something that I'm going to be doing from here forward. That'll be out very soon, paper and audio. Currently, the Obri Project translator, Hannah, has gotten part 1 of Wilhelm Kammeyer's The Falsification of the History of Early Christianity, part 1 done, which is about 100 plus pages, and is already starting on part 2. She's got 1 chapter already translated. These I am editing. So I'm serving as the editor on this. She's doing the translating. I'm serving as the editor. I'm going to be looking into the rights to publish, essentially. This was, Kammeyer lived and wrote mostly in the early 1900s in Germany. None of his works have been translated into English, which is, you could say it's a red flag, or you could say, well, there was just no money for anybody to make. And either one of them might be correct. However, I think these works are so important and well done and well thought out that I think there's far more reason than just there wasn't a lot of money to be made producing them. So when we're finished with that, the plan is to put them into book form, both into paper and also purchasable PDF. Okay. Now, a lot of people know that for years I've been working on a concept, which is to produce a book that the working title was basically The Bible versus the Middle East. Anyone who has listened to the last couple of entries of the Obri Hours podcast knows that I hit a super huge snag in directions, which in a sense it was a snag, and in a sense maybe it's not a snag, because it helped me to figure out the orientation of the actual Canaan from the Bible. However, it is one of a dozen or more hang-ups that I've had on this project because of studying language at the same time as working on geography. So in thinking a lot of these things over and getting this interlinear done, I've decided that I believe the best way to move forward on this so that I can get some material out there is that I'm going to produce an initial copy of the book, which is actually going to be mostly just addressing this issue based on what materials are currently available. Doing some examinations of words and pointing out how they're improperly used in context, but not going into the real serious stuff. Because that in and of itself is a work in and of itself. And that will probably be produced in a secondary part to that. So the book might just be 2 parts. It might be more. There's so many aspects concerning the geography that's described in the Bible of Canaan and surrounding areas and Palestine and the Middle East, which just doesn't add up at all. The next thing is starting in September, the first Saturday in September, I'll be starting the live streams, Saturday live streams, tentatively from 1 to 2:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, in which what I'll be doing is for the first 45 minutes, I'll be showing a propaganda piece. Most of these are produced by government or government agencies, U.S. government agencies for the most part. Very few of them are like joint projects between private industry and U.S. government. And they're going to be, the live streaming is going to be done on Prism. Prism is, from what I understand, it's just a very easy GUI, graphical user interface of the, and I know a lot of you probably know the software I'm talking about. It's it's open source. It's one of the most common and versatile live streaming softwares that's open source. I just can't remember the name of it. It's like a few letters. Sorry about that. But it still does take some getting used to how to do this properly with Prism. So that's kind of one of the hang-ups there. The first 45 minutes will be showing the propaganda piece or part of the propaganda piece with some stops along the way to point out certain things as we go. The last 45 minutes will be to answer, first off, any super chats that come, because I think I'm going to have serious copyright issues when I actually publish these things after the fact. So the super chats are going to really help both myself and the person that's going to be watching the comments and trying to make sure I get the good comments and can integrate them into the last 45 minutes, which is going to be, hopefully I'll be joined by some of the people who I've invited to participate in this. It's mostly people that have construction knowledge and are also researchers who don't tend to believe the establishment story either. Should be very good. And hopefully it will be far more educational and productive and edifying than most of what we see going around these days. So I will keep everybody updated on that to make sure you know for sure, yeah, it's starting first Saturday of September, 1 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. If anything changes, I will let you know. If any of you are not in my Facebook Obery Project Panoply group, join that, because that's where I post, a lot of things like that. But I'll try to keep you updated and other things. But like I said, I'm going to have serious issues with copyright because a private company has bought up a lot of these. A private company. So tax dollars paid for them in the first place, and then they sold all of these, most of them, to a private company called Periscope Film. They have a YouTube channel. It's loaded with these old films. The problem is when a private company buys these things, they then have the right to do whatever they want with them. They can edit them in any way they want, change them in any way they want. They own them now. So apparently the U.S. government thought that it was absolutely lawful and moral and right to sell all kinds of material that was paid for with tax dollars to a private company. Think about that for a minute. All right, so now that I've gotten all of that out of the way, I did want to talk for a few minutes about micro hydros, or what they call micro hydroelectric dams. I just wanted to talk a little bit about what they are and how they're supposed to work, what information there is on them, and the problems that I kind of have with the official story on them. Okay, what are my issues with micro hydroelectric dams? I am not a dam expert. I understand the basics of how a hydroelectric dam should work. But just the straight numbers concerning these micro hydros are really not what caught my attention in the first place. What caught my attention was when I moved to Michigan about a year ago, and I moved near Grand Rapids, so it's not quite central Lower Peninsula, but it's a little west and it's a little south, sort of, but not really. It's close to the center. It's really easy once you get kind of towards the center of Michigan to start traveling all over Michigan. And Michigan is a state that is a completely different world than what I grew up in Northwest Indiana. I grew up in the southern part of Porter County, Indiana, which is one of the tri-county area. So the 3 counties that border on Lake Michigan, that some people would just tell you were the nicer suburbs of Chicago, and they wouldn't be too far off if they told you that. I had never really traveled to Michigan, so I didn't really have a concept of it. It was very abstract to me. I assumed that I would essentially be seeing something quite like Indiana, except further north. But when I actually got here and started moving around, I realized that was very untrue. Michigan, for one thing, Indiana's a great state if you're growing large amounts of crops or keeping large amounts of livestock, because there's a lot of areas of Indiana that are quite flat and good for that. And the soil in Indiana is very good. It's very rich. Same situation with Illinois, same situation with Ohio, those states. They're very good for a lot of farming, a lot of even land in those, and probably more in Indiana, definitely in Illinois. But in Michigan, now there are, more flatter, let's say even areas of Michigan, but not a lot, not like Indiana. Michigan, for one thing, has a hell of a lot of topography. It may not have mountains, but it sure the heck does have a lot of hills, especially when you go up north. Not only that, Michigan has a heck of a lot of rivers, too. Rivers that tend to empty into the Great Lakes. Lots of them. I live by one pretty large river, the Grand River. The Grand River goes from let's see, I guess the Grand River rises in the state capital, which I can't remember right now. Anyways, yeah, so that's northeast of Grand Rapids, and the Grand River just continues down through another few smaller city or towns into Grand Rapids, and then empties out into Lake Michigan in Holland, Michigan. And you can guess what kind of people are mostly in Holland, Michigan, based on the name. Anyways, it's an amazing state. And the thing I found with even, I think the first little trip I took up to the UP, which is just phenomenal up in the UP, but there are a lot of these, what they call micro hydroelectric dams in Michigan. Lots of them. Now, that wasn't the biggest thing because, I believe there's plenty of micro hydros in a lot of states east of the Mississippi. I'm not going to say there's a lot in states west of the Mississippi. In fact, when you get west of the Mississippi, you're going to find far more of the what they call small, which are actually a lot larger than micro hydros, or large, which would be like the Hoover Dam, Cheeseman, lots. There's plenty of these big ones, and they'll call them sometimes gravity arch dams. So they're the ones that curve into the reservoir lake, just for strength and all that. I think some of those are actually quite old too, but that's not what I'm concentrating on. There's so many of these micro hydros in Michigan. The last trip we took was up to Alpena because I wanted to see. Alpena has what was for the longest time, and I don't know why it still wouldn't be, but I don't know if they call it this anymore. But for the longest time, it was the largest Portland cement plant in the world. It is in Alpena, and I wanted to see it. It used to just be called Alpena Portland Cement or Alpena Cement, and now it's Lafarge. It's called Lafarge. Really cool to actually be there, right by Lafarge. The only complaint I have is so much of it is fenced off as private property. It's really hard to get good views of, for instance, the port, and the port was so important to me. So if you look at it on Google Earth, there are two aspects to the port that I find really interesting. Unfortunately, even Google Earth doesn't give you, I think, let's say it doesn't emphasize the points that I'm most interested in, but I'm going to pull that up real quick. Okay, I'm going to start with the long view and sort of zoom in. So yeah, I guess as you can see, the Grand Rapids area here on Michigan is a little bit, it's definitely West Michigan, and it's a little further south when you consider, you know, the Lower Peninsula is pretty long right here. The Lower Peninsula north to south is probably longer than Indiana north to south, and I thought Indiana was a decent state to drive north to south. It's like 5 hours plus. And yeah, it's a pretty good drive when you're going to drive up to Mackinac City. Love the fudge there. It's not like anywhere else, man. And they make it like right there. These stores, they have these big tables. They make the fudge like right there, and it smells amazing. But anyways, so yeah, just up to Mackinac City, it's like 5+ hours just to get up there. And then you've got the Upper Peninsula. Now, me personally, I'm kind of a stickler about this whole thing, and I don't really think it should be called a peninsula. Why? Because the bodies of water that are around it are not one continuous body of water. But hey, you can argue about that. Now, the Keweenaw Peninsula here, I know they pronounce it differently. That's, yeah, I'll call that a peninsula. And I'm hoping to go and see this before too long. And you've got the Marquette ore docks near there, which are freaking awesome. But anyway, so the Alpena is up here, so they call this sometimes the Lower Peninsula a glove, because it kind of looks like a hand in a mitten, or a mitten, you know. So it's up near the what would be the index finger of the mitten. You've got this really large bay of Huron here in Alpena. And I went to a ton of places up here around Alpena, and then above Alpena County is Presqu'île County. Lots of cool stuff. Really, lots of cool stuff. So the Alpena cement plant, you can see that as you're zooming in. So this is all the city of Alpena right here, and then just to the north of it here, all of this area you see right here is the Alpena cement plant. Now, a lot of this is the quarry. You see down here. I don't want to do a whole show just on the Alpena cement plant, but I did take a lot of pictures of the quarry and what I could get to from the outside. The thing that I think is interesting, they got this Google Earth picture when there was a ship docked at these concrete silos. So these silos are all made out of concrete, and they all hold dry Portland cement. And these ships come in, and I think they still own their own ships that ship this Portland cement all over the place via the Great Lakes. And I mean, I'm told it only takes a week or so for a ship to go from Duluth out to the St. Lawrence Seaway into the Atlantic, like 2 weeks, maybe even less than that. So it's all pretty fast. Lafarge, as it is now, owns their own ships. So you see the size of this ship. This Great Lakes class carrier, I want to say this one right here, is at least 700+ feet long. And you can see it next to these silos. Unfortunately, this 3D pic on Google Earth is not as impressive looking as some are. That's a real bummer, because this whole battery of silos, when you get up even remotely close to them, are impressive. And when you put this huge ship up next to them, and you see the way that, for instance, the chutes are designed on these silos to empty the cement in there, and how they're designed with a certain height in mind and width in mind, and, you know, width of these cargo bays in mind, and you start thinking, oh, Alpena Cement was supposed to be founded in the early 1900s, just like most of these micro hydros that are everywhere in Michigan and east of the Mississippi. were supposed to be built around that same time too, and you're like, this whole story seems just really strange. And then you look, you can see that this is clearly a harbor right here for the ship, and that's interesting. So they only have it set up where they're pulling in for starboard loading. But anyways, that's not really that interesting. So if you zoom in a little bit, you can see there's another port here, man. Now, this was supposed to be built in like 1907 or 010, and I guess it must have become the world's largest Portland cement plant in, I guess this is like the Kingpin's Bowl. Pow, all at once. Because they've got this second dock here, and you could see the ship could probably, theoretically, pull in on both sides. It was probably made to pull in here, this area here. Maybe I'm wrong. Hey, if you're seafaring and you know more about these things, you just let me know. But you see this area right here? This area right here, unless I'm just crazy, this area right here looks like it also once had a battery of enormous silos just like here. Just kind of looks like it. Or a battery of something right here. And then in such a short time, it's gone. For something that only started a century ago. That's something. It's just really something, as far as I'm concerned. Because if you consider, like you look at all their quarries. I mean, they don't even have like 2 square miles of quarries that they've been quarrying on. And I mean, just the thought that they would have this huge installation of something right here meant for ships to pull up and be loaded here also, and it's now gone. That's weird. That seems far too short-lived, let's just say. But back to microhydros and the issues that I have with microhydros. I want to talk about a couple of things. The first thing is, and I don't know if I'm going to go into these signs or not. The first thing is this. It is tremendously hard to find like good materials on these microhydros. Any of them that get you inside, let you see what's inside. Which I think is strange, and I've been looking for a long time. Now, I guess what you would expect to see inside is you would expect, based on the size of these. I've got a few pictures of this. I'm actually just probably going to be showing you pictures of the Cook plant. This is the Cook plant. It's on the Au River. The Au Sable River. There's supposed to be 6. We only got to see, I think, 3 on the Au Sable this time. So there's 3 to go next time I can get up there. This is the rear. So the powerhouse, as you can see, is to the lower right, the roof of the powerhouse right here. And then you can basically see about the level of the reservoir, the lake. They have pontoons over here, disallowing anyone who's boating to come to this area. Because you would think that, you've got over here, the spillways are right here, and then the earthen dam is over here, and I don't know how far that earthen dam actually continues over here. And then over to the left, there would be more earthen dam. So in this area, you would expect there are, let's see, the gates, I think, are over between all of this concrete and these the walkways and the building itself. And I'll move forward. This is just another shot of it. This is a shot straight on of some of the operations in the rear of the purported microhydro. Now, these would be the areas of the gates, or what would technically be called, because I can't always technically remember all the technical names, the penstock. So the penstock is the area going from the reservoir to the turbines. Basically the piping or channel that goes from the reservoir to the turbines. by design. That's the Penstock. So here's the side of it. And one thing I always notice with these buildings, or with the whole complex, that immediately sort of tipped me off to weirdness, is that the buildings tend to be or look different than, let's say, all of the structures and other things that are around them. The thing is, newer micro hydros, and there are a few newer ones, they are totally different than these, folks. First off, they tend to also make the powerhouse out of poured concrete or block or something. They don't tend to make it out of these various different kinds of bricks. Various different kinds of bricks often. And you can see that they are different kinds of bricks, which is interesting since a lot of these were supposed to be constructed around the same time. You would almost kind of think, well, they were supposed to be constructed around the same time. A lot of them were supposed to be constructed by the same people or similar people, but they oftentimes employ very different design elements, even though most of them are basic rectangles. But different design elements, different kinds of brick, this stepping on the brick, up this rake, you'll see different kinds like that, but different sorts of architectural design in them. The other strange thing you'll see is like this. So often, these areas where where large openings once were, that are now blocked off. And this does look like it was originally designed to be a large opening. You've got this whole header running across it right here, but it looks like it's essentially been blocked up and then covered with at least a good layer of mortar. You'll see that all the time in various openings, the way that they seem to be altered quite a bit from maybe their original design and construction. Then you'll have the areas where the Penstocks are supposed to be coming into the building. They're always obscured. I can never get a good view of those because those areas are the ones that are always fenced off. Okay, well that's the back. That's the operations area. Sure. Okay, but here's the front. Interesting. Now, almost every single one of these buildings that you're going to get to, you're going to see this row of windows in the front. In this case, they've actually left glass in a number of them. They have altered this opening, and this is something that on some of the dams that I visited in Manistee were like this. They were either bricked up, partially bricked up, or areas that looked like windows, they had been altered where certain like doors, either bay doors or in this case as large French doors, double doors, and then this whole area has just been filled in with this this metal plate for not really even a transom, maybe a vented transom, but definitely altered. And then the lower part of them always just doesn't seem like it's quite that it was installed at quite the same time. Certainly doesn't match these buildings at all. I just would think if they wanted to keep with a consistent aesthetic, they would have bricked down these. But oftentimes you're going to see, again, this concrete work right here. And then altogether, it just seems a little just sort of odd. And then when I started spotting, for instance, low head dams right in front of these, and I thought to myself, and now in this case, you can't clearly see one here, and I got really close up on it. Let me see if I got any decent pictures right up close on it. You definitely have the pontoons, which is, here's what's really strange about these pontoons right here. I could see them here because they just don't want people getting too close here, but the powerhouse itself, based on the way that they say that these are set up, it's not really generating that much power as far as the water coming out of them, not typically, and it's not really that rough. But again, you could say liabilities, so on and so forth. Definitely the spillways, when water starts coming out of those spillways, that's serious, serious business. Like over here, the gates, that's more surging, rough waters. But not so much coming out of here. And again, what I tend to see either in front of these buildings or below them is work that always seems like later alterations, sometimes kind of just slapped together. I can show you on some other micro hydros too. But there's enough about the buildings, and there's oftentimes enough low heads in front of them that they don't make any sense, the low heads in front of them. Now, some people could say, well, they installed those low heads, and I'm just giving you possible reasons to keep people away from the powerhouse, in their boats. The problem is that they cause more danger than anything else to put those there, where, you know what, I think for a long time you've always been able to fill up some kind of material with air, string it together with rope, and throw it across there, just like you see here, these little pontoons with the ropes. Easy peasy. There's absolutely no justification for spending the kind of money that it takes to build the coffer dams that you have to build to put in these low heads. And these low heads are serious business. They're not a little structure. They're big structures. They're big, wide structures. They raise the level of the water a lot. And here's one of the serious problems with having these low heads in front. Now, in a lot of these instances, it looks like they have demoed the low heads that were in the front of these dams, but not in every instance. I can't prove this in every instance. And sometimes there's low heads that are freaking weird looking, which I'll talk about in other videos. But here's one of the problems I've got with so many of these micro hydros. For one thing, having low heads in front of them. And here's a little bit better view of all of this. Now, do I know that this sill right here and this opening being like this was original? I do not, because it's not that difficult for them to come in here and just put some sort of a steel header across, throw this stone sill on, and then just make this. You could just basically keep these windows relatively the same in this upper area, and then change what used to be a window right here. They may have actually just salvaged the stone sill from these windows and just transferred it up here when this was altered. I don't know that it was altered. I'm just saying, as somebody who has worked as a contractor and in carpentry for a number of years, they look like alterations. I can't prove this yet. They look like it. And when you consider the fact that, and look at the details, the types of milled details here. Now, some guys out there, some earwigs out there might tell you, well, it was just so easy to make these. They could just, there's catalogs, all artificial stone and milling. But the thing is, you actually need skilled people who know how to put this shit together. Whether they could mill stone or not. It's not, the point is not if they could. The point is, how many skilled people do you have that can actually, first off, produce these things, and secondly, know how to properly install these things? That's more important. However, we won't get caught up on the earwig right now. A lot of interesting work on these old buildings. But here's one of the problems I'm going to give you with, and then the way that, these various concrete structures are sort of fit. Whenever I can get on the side of the building where the concrete and sometimes the sheet piling and different metal sort of meet up with the building, I like to get pictures of those to see if that's something that looks like it was pre-planned and designed and put together. And this is the other thing you got to think about design. You have to design based on the space that you're going to use. How wide the spillways with the powerhouse and its gates are going to be, the earth dam parts of it, and how fast they say these dams went up. They say they went up so fast. So many of them are in remarkably remote areas. And you go 100 years ago, and there are very few people around. Sometimes not even train tracks that had come through these places yet. and they say they just went up like that. And you have to design, you have to spend serious time on engineering and designing these places too. All right, there's a lot to it. It's serious business. So I'm not sure if there's anything more new stuff that I can show you here. The water, I couldn't see through it well enough, down far enough to see if there was any kind of foundation of a low head in that area. So this is just their substation, which, of course, and again, all of these are designed so differently. If so many of them were designed and built by similar people for similar purposes and all of that, you would expect the substations to be very similar in very similar locations. You know, there's so much more similarity you would expect to see in them than all the variations that look really after the fact, you know. Just kind of a little more up close of that beautiful detail of that stepped brick going up to the cornice there by the gutters. It's very nice. I think this roof, now this is really interesting about this roof, either this roof, this sort of looks like a green clay tile roof, is maybe not original. When you look at this picture, it's the only picture I've found on the Wikipedia so far of what was supposed to be it when it was built in the first place. And this thing looks like a complete joke. I've got it on screen. This is as big as I can make it here on screen. I did zoom it up in some other programs, and it doesn't get any better. And for them supposedly taking this picture in like 1909, well, actually 1911, you would expect a very high quality picture. I mean, come on. They could take essentially high-res images during the Civil War, and you're telling me that they couldn't get a nice high-res image of this. It's very hard to believe. Here's the problem I have. I'll go over to here. Now, this is a cross-section, basically a cross-section design of the way that these micro dams are supposed to work, or in general, the way that hydros are supposed to work. Now, bear with me on this. So, in order to make this turbine, so the water comes down with force, and it has to come down with force. A lot of force, because you really want to spin that turbine. And I mean really spin that sucker. Because the more revolutions or rotations that you get on that turbine, the more you get on the generator, the more power you generate in the generator. And of course, from there, that just makes, it's like common sense. We want to spin that turbine basically as hard and fast as we can continuously so that we generate the greatest amount of power. And here's why I will say that I believe that that is absolutely the case. You want the most power and spin that you can get up to a certain point, because I'm sure no matter what the turbine is, it can only spin probably so fast. Same with the generator, I would assume, but I don't know that for sure. Here's the thing. If you go looking for videos on YouTube of people that are setting up these micro dams on their property. They have like a little water, a little creek or something uphill on their property, and they'll set up. What you have to do is you have to start with your intake, and I'll just go back to this little guy here, and I'll increase the size of it a little bit so you can see it better. So they'll start with their intake, which would be like the creek or stream or whatever. Sometimes they got a little pond, they create a little dam, and they do their intake from there. And they're always going to have a catch, basically a catchment right here. So that screens out a lot of the debris. You don't want that going through the turbine, rocks, sticks, fish. And so they're going to, now in most dams, and here's the other thing that's very screwy about this, a good dam design, you're going to start with your head pound. You're going to go down your intake, and you're going to come to essentially like a reservoir barrel. Now, this is where you can collect your water and keep it up nice and high and sort of under pressure so that you can have a constant stream from that thing down to your turbine. You'll see that in a lot of dams, okay? I don't think you don't have to have that, but in a lot of situations, they definitely have that reservoir tank. Definitely people who make these on their own property, they channel the water from the intake, whatever their source is, down to a tank. And they're using that tank to regulate the water. So you can have regulated water from there And then you're going to go from there, your tank, and I guess you could consider the head pond in this case the tank. But again, most good dam designs are going to have more distance vertically and horizontally between the head pond and the final destination being the turbine than these do. These have like none. It's so little. It's so little. Just like I showed you here. Back up a few pictures. I'm just so you can get an idea. Let's look. Okay, that's not a good one. Let's say a good one. Okay, yeah, maybe this first one. This is the head pond, and this, by the way, this is one of the few that has a little bit more horizontal space between the head pond and the powerhouse. Okay, so you don't have like, okay, so this is a decent picture. So from the head pond, you've got about 50 feet or so of penstock that you're going to have to run diagonally. You're going to have to make up both your horizontal and your vertical. You don't got a lot of vertical here. Vertical is important. That's why they make a lot of these dams, the larger hydro dams. That's why they make them where they're holding these lakes 150 feet up from the powerhouse, because you get that vertical. And they have the powerhouse horizontally far in front, so you get the horizontal. So when all of that comes down, the penstock, it's putting tons of pressure and force on that turbine and really spinning that turbine, creating a lot of power, a lot of good power. These situations, you don't have that. And I've seen situations with these micro dams where there's even less space than that between the mill pond, a lot of people might call the reservoir, and the turbine, where the turbine should be based on where this house is, they say, is the powerhouse. So what should be happening is you should have gates. Open up the gates. It'll travel through the penstock. Now I don't think this is a great graphic, because one of the things you would want to do, you'd have to do, especially in this situation where they've got this powerhouse right up next to the pond, and this is so unfair to show it like this. In most of these situations, it's even closer, and there's not as much distance for this water to travel. But you'd also want to be reducing in your penstock. You'd want to be reducing, and by the time it gets to that turbine, anybody who understands this stuff better, you feel free to correct me in the comments, because I'm just doing my best to understand the best way that a dam works in order to create energy through a turbine to generator situation, and why these are as they are when newer versions of these aren't like this. The newer versions of micro dams actually have the powerhouse far lower and far further in front of the head pond. Now, you would want to reduce this, because when you reduce the water, and there's mathematical equations as far as how far the water's dropping, what it's going through the penstock, how much you want to reduce it over a certain amount of vertical and horizontal drop before it gets to that turbine, so that it gives you an appropriate amount of spin to create an appropriate amount of power that you want to. Usually these people are trying to power a certain amount of things, or sometimes all of their house or other things, depending on the size of the turbine and the generator, and how much, it's a big thing, how much water pressure you can get through there to run this thing for as long as you can. Unfortunately, a lot of these guys are going through manufacturers of these products. Not like I'm saying anything bad about these manufacturers, but they are dependent on them because they're using them. It would be great if, I think, more and more of us got more and more aware of how we could design and use, our own designs of turbines and generators to do these things as we need. And maybe we could get a little bit less dependent on electricity and power and all that stuff too. It'd probably be good, right? So it has to be reduced in a certain specific mathematical equation. And you can, of course, bring this penstock down into a vortex, which will give you more power, because that vortex is going to give you at least more linear feet in that drop, and it's going to speed the water up. So, of course, that would be smart, to put it into a vortex. Weird thing, though, when you look at, no, not here. They don't show it here, which is unfortunate. When you look at the pictures that I took of the initial sign outside, look at this. This sign right here, you look at this picture up here. I'll increase the size and then pull that down a little bit. Look at this picture up here. See these wheels? Those are all horizontal. These are all horizontal. And unless, I'm not understanding the different kinds of turbine generator situations you can have, I would think the most efficient one you can have is everything straight in a line. Everything straight in a line. And this makes me think that their turbines are horizontal turbines instead of vertical turbines, which I would think the vertical turbines would be the ones that you would probably want to use because you could design the penstock to go into a vortex and push that turbine. These ones are vertical, and even if they do have a turbine that's down there that's turning and then they're transferring it, I don't know if they're actually losing a certain amount of their energy in having to do that. Basically, it would seem to me every time you have to do that, go in those angles, that you might be losing energy. But again, if I'm wrong, correct me. Do it nice. I mean, fuck's sakes. Now, here's my issue. So the turbine's supposed to be below the powerhouse. The penstock full of water comes down at high pressure, turns the turbine. Then you have this whole operation. Beneath, and it's supposed to be beneath unless you're doing a run-of-river kind of turbine, you have your draft tube. That's where the water that's just hit the turbine is going so that it can be essentially drained. And what they call the water that's coming out in front of the powerhouse, they call that the tail race, draft tube and tail race. Now, what I thought was weird about, for instance, this drawing is that the draft tube is below the water level of the tail race. And I thought, well, that can't be good. As well as this turbine is actually below the level of the tail race. I thought, that can't be good. Now, I know that this is supposed to be coming down at an incredible rate of speed. Two things. One thing, the draft tube is not in line with how the water's coming down. It looks a little strange. And I know that you can have different kinds of designs. I understand. My issue is, I would think that you would want the turbine above or at least around where the tail race level of the water is going to be, so that there isn't any back pressure, essentially, because there's going to be a certain amount of pressure that your tail water is going to apply. Even if you got a turbine that's moving like crazy, it's still going to apply something if you're putting that below water level. It may have the power to push it through a draft tube that looks like this, and most of these designs I've seen look like this. Yeah, it may have a lot of pressure that can put it through there, but why would you want to do that? That seems like you're just using more energy than you need to push it through a tube or tunnel that is below what your tail race water level is. Seems like it's working against your end goal of creating power, as in moving that turbine as fast as you can. So, because that seems to be the case, then I can't for the life of me understand why any power company would want to, in addition, put a low head dam in front of their powerhouse, thus raising significantly the level of the tail race vertically. They already don't have a lot of pressure coming down vertically from the head pond. They don't have a lot of pressure coming down horizontally from the head pond. And then to stick a low head dam right in front of the powerhouse, thus raising the level of the tail race, tells me that they're just hampering their operation by doing that. Doesn't make sense. It doesn't make sense. And close to half of the micro dams I've visited just in Michigan so far have a low head dam of one kind or another in front of the powerhouse of these dams, close enough to affect the tail race, the levels of these dams that are supposed to be creating power. I'm not saying they don't create power. They may create power, absolutely. I saw some videos on micro dams that you could tell certainly looked like the same building on the inside as the outside based on the windows, the window configuration, the panes, the colors of the panes, and then where the generators were. And they showed it close up enough to where it looked like there were generators in there. I'm not saying there weren't. And I'm not saying they weren't working as generators. I'm not saying they weren't creating power that was going to a substation and out to customers. I'm not even saying that. But what I am saying is there's a lot of weird shit about these micro dams. That needs to be, good questions need to be asked about them. They need to be understood better. There needs to be a little bit more openness about the design, the construction, things like that. And besides all of that, there's also the fact that there is at least one big company that I've found, and there's probably more, their specialty is converting places, buildings, situations into power plants, installing turbines and generators in multiple different kinds of situations. They can convert one situation into another situation, or basically refab the whole thing, which is just interesting given how short a life a lot of these are supposed to have had, that you would have an old company who's specialized in refabbing or equipping specifically for making hydropower and other kinds of power. That's just interesting to me. And I don't know enough about the whole operation of these things yet. Not telling you I know enough to say this, that, and the other. But I am saying that there's a lot of super, super weird things, especially about the official stories of most of these dams. One is how fast they're constructed. The others I've pointed out so far. And you have all kinds of oddities. Not only about the individual dams themselves, but about other similar dams that are similar sizes. It goes on and on and on and on and on and on. Where they're at, why they're there, why so many are often there, complaints and problems that they tend to cause people that are near them, and everything that sounds like it was, either complete lack of planning, and then everything seemed to go through just like really great, and they've held up for a hell of a long time for such lack of planning and fast construction. Or there's just a lot to this story that we're not being told. I just think it's the latter. So that's where I'll wrap. And thanks again, everybody, for the comments and everything. They help a lot. They help get these in front of more people. So again, appreciate it. I'll see you next time.